Hello, class. This is your first lecture for Chapter 7, Social Media. Now, the first question we want to address is why use social media? Why is it so important for so many businesses now? In the past, whenever traditional news models would spread information, they would use what's called a one-to-many model. They were acting as the go-betweens between public relations departments or emergency personnel, addressing our audiences and helping them understand what was happening in the community or in the world. Now, because of social media and the internet, we have a many to many model. So not only can these traditional news outlets offer information, we are also able to collect and distribute information as an audience as well. And of course, that does include offering that information to the traditional outlets. Now, of course, the other side of it is we're also able to, if you're working in a traditional news outlet or if you're working for an organization with an online presence, you're able to create micro targeting based on your audiences. So, what that means is instead of trying to focus on a really broad group, you're actually focusing on a more specific group of people. So, your target audience is going to be a bit smaller than it was in prior times. Now, you also, of course, have a lot of direct audience engagement. And when, of course, if you've gone on any message boards ever, you'll notice that there are a lot of passionate users online. Sometimes they're offering useful information for news organizations or companies. Sometimes they're just being passionate because they're passionate about a topic or a product. You also have selective engagement happening. What that means is either through the social media platform being used or through selection of either the audience or the business, you're able to have to focus on the smaller niche community whenever you are engaging with different people. This also means that your audiences are able to grow a little differently than in a traditional model because your audience is going to either follow or like or share different things. The media platform is probably going to offer recommendations based on your audience's likes and what types of optimal wording you have in your posts or in your account profiles. So a lot going on in the many to many model. Here are some examples of different social media programs. A lot of these apps are ones that are still around today. There are some that are gone, like Google Plus. Google Plus isn't around anymore. You have different focuses for each platform. However, pretty much all of them now will allow you to add text or links, images, videos. Most of them have added some form of live interaction as well. The programs that originally started with text with link sharing are Twitter, Facebook, Reddit also has a lot of it. Weibo does as well. You also have image-based platforms like Instagram or Snapchat. And of course, Snapchat also includes forms of video and live streaming, and as does Instagram, but they aren't as focused on it as YouTube or Twitch or TikTok. Now, messaging is something that goes back to the beginning of the internet and of peer-to-peer sharing and everything. You have messages based in email. And of course, you have the SMS system as well. And we now also have encrypted services like Signal. WhatsApp, which is part of Facebook, does have some encryption on it. WeChat, Line, and iMessage are also messaging systems. And we also have a lot of professional social media networks as well. Two of them are LinkedIn and Slack. Slack tends to be something you're going to use within a business more than something open to the general public. LinkedIn is for people looking to put out their resume or connect with others in their industry. And of course, you can always host your own blog or website. Some free blog hosts are Blogger or WordPress. Medium is also another one. Now, when you're looking at building an audience, some of the things you need to consider, of course, are choosing a platform based on your target audience's needs. If your target audience is going to be people looking to renovate their houses, and imagine that they probably want videos or pictures, so you might use YouTube or Pinterest, but you might not look at using Twitter as much as those other two social media sites. And of course, whenever you create posts, you want to humanize the brand or company. You're looking at making yourself more accessible. It's part of why Twitter accounts or Facebook accounts for multimedia journalists are so valuable. They're able to connect with their community, develop stronger relationships than they would have in the past if they were just people on TV who only came around when something really major happened in the area. And they're also able to get different kinds of stories than what you might have covered originally. So, for example, a lot of times a news organization will cover will cover an event like a festival, a small festival, or a like there was one story before about a police officer who was going around mowing lawns in the neighborhood where he worked as a way to help some of the people in the community. Those kinds of stories wouldn't necessarily make it on the air, but there's something that you can definitely push and incorporate online on websites and on social media accounts to promote a little extra content and drive more traffic toward the primary website. So whenever you're posting online, you also want to make sure that the content you're providing is valuable. You need to figure out how it relates to your audience. How is this beneficial for them? How will sharing this information not only help you, but help them too? So you don't want any low quality, like buy our chips type of advertisements. You want something that will where they can actually where your audience can interact with your company. Like when Lay's had their give us your favorite flavor combination sweepstakes. That's the kind of content they might promote where they have some sort of audience interaction and they're able to address maybe some issues or some positive feedback that they see online. And of course, whenever you are building an audience, especially or trying to maintain your audience, you need to have a consistent posting rate. That means making sure your posts are timely and engaging for your audience. And you want to have everything posted. If you have a schedule, you want to, let's say, do it on Mondays at 8 a.m. or around 8 a.m. Or you'll have posts on Thursdays between 4 and 6 because you run a restaurant and you know people are looking for dinner around that time. So consider your audience's needs and whenever you're posting, both for content and for time and engagement, and make sure that you're using a platform relevant to your target audience. Now, social media has done quite a bit in the realm of journalism. It's made it a lot easier for news organizations to provide breaking news. You're able to connect now on your phone in so many ways that were never even thought possible in the past. You're able to collect and send information. Again, the reporters are able to have a rapport between themselves and the target audience of the station, and they act as a go-between for the stations and the audience to try and make sure that the audience's needs are being met in their traditional forms, as well as the what are still considered more non-traditional forms of internet journalism and social media content. And of course, social media is a good way for these traditional news outlets to drive traffic to their websites. It may also include people buying more physical papers or buying more or actually watching the 5 o'clock news because they saw a tweet earlier today about this report that's happening regarding something in a person's neighborhood. Now, whenever you're creating these posts, most of the time you want to use micro URLs. They're a lot cleaner and smaller than the traditional URL, especially if you're writing one for a web story. A lot of times you'll end up with a lot of backslashes and numbers and things that don't make sense to the average user, or you'll run out of characters if you're trying to post on Twitter. And you can include video links or video little snippets like you do from Boomerang or another posting device. Now, one of the less good things about using social media in journalism is the problem of fact checking. There is a larger burden on the audience to decide whether or not these traditional or non-traditional journalists are reliable. Are they providing actual reliable content where they can go in and see, oh yeah, this study is legit and someone really did find out this new thing about climate change? Or are they just a person who is like being pushed by the social media algorithm because their posts are getting so many hits, and it's someone who's spouting a bunch of unverified nonsense? So need to check sources before sharing as an audience member, but also especially if you're working online for a company or as a journalist or reporter. Now, in a Pew Research study released last year, about 1 in 5 or 18% of Americans reported using social media as their main political news source. And about 25% said they used apps or websites to find their information. A lot of these people, especially the ones who used social media were as their primary source, were considered less engaged with current events. Now, most of their data did focus on political news, which of course it was an election year, and it was also about the coronavirus epidemic and how it related to mainstream political news. So it is a very specific type of data in this study, but it is somewhat telling, especially when you look at the previous 2 decades of information we have available now on using these kinds of studies and peer-reviewed information to learn about who is looking online, how are they using online journalism to create their worldview, or is it changing their worldview in some way? A lot of people in the study who reported using social media were also younger and generally more democratic leaning. This was followed up in another study released in September of this year. You can click either of these links and take a look at it. You'll have to go through, of course, the PowerPoint itself to get there. Now, NYU Stern did have a study that they released this month about the effects of Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And according to their research, they did find that exposure to those groups caused it intensified the political divide in the country. I have a link here also for an article on the Pointer website, which is run by journalists and news editors and different people regarding the study. Now, one of the biggest things in it, at the end, they made recommendations to try and offset some of the viral negativity they found whenever they were conducting the study on social media platforms. One of them was for a strong recommendation by toward these companies for them to stop rewarding viral content. Obviously, it's a very tough thing for them to put into practice because, I mean, these companies are based around the idea that they're going to make money off of you staying on the website longer. And the way you stay on the website longer is figuring out what gets clicks, which means stuff that goes viral. And unfortunately, there was a lot of what's called political dosing. So what that means is they found that a lot of people, even if they weren't actively involved in groups on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube involving politics, they would end up with suggestions for these more extreme political content creators, even though it wasn't technically something they were following already. One of the other problems found by the study, of course, is the information cocoon or echo chamber. A lot of organizations now do have an issue with this distortion of our, as a group of people, our innate fears and our resentments. We end up in kind of this big hole where all you hear are people repeating back to you the same information that over and over again, instead of getting to hear information from people with different worldviews than yourself. Of course, there have been other studies where they've reviewed ways to try and break the echo chambers with varying success. It depends a lot on, of course, people, but the main thing is for organizations to try and avoid creating these echo chambers. One of the problems, of course, is with the idea that you can like or dislike something on a platform and it will no longer show you that information. Unfortunately, what that means is you're going to constantly see things you like instead of things you don't like. And you'll also, whenever you do see something that where you disagree, you're less likely to feel open to possibly even listening to that person's point of view. Now, a government regulation recommended by Stern was for the Federal Trade Commission to oversee these platforms. So instead of them existing as they are now, which is as private entities where the oversight happens from within, it would mean the Federal Trade Commission would have more control over how these companies are monitored, and it would be a little closer to the way things work with, let's say, television, instead of the way we oversee newspapers. A big question over the past couple of weeks is who is to blame? So, should we blame Facebook for its actions, or YouTube, or any of these other groups? The In general, there are a lot of different opinions about different things related to the way Facebook is created, or how it's interacting with its audience right now. In an opinion article by Howard Saltz, who is a Pulitzer winning editor, he says that people are the key ingredient in all social media, basically, and that as people, we as individuals and as groups need to recognize and use better judgment online. And one of part of what he's saying is that we need to look in the mirror and see if we're spreading untested rumors, and if we are, maybe recognize that we need to be accountable for our actions as much as Facebook or Instagram or any of those other places need to be responsible for their part in this change in society. Now, what do you think? Do do you think there needs to be more regulation or oversight? Is there more personal accountability? Would more personal accountability make everything a little better? Do we need to use more of a common judgment whenever you look at a website or some information? Maybe check sources, do different things. Think about it, and the next time you go to check some headlines and see where it leads you. Now, your quiz is posted for Chapter 7, social media. Please continue reviewing online lectures. Make sure you log into attendance. And if you don't see a password, you can mark attendance without one. You don't need to have it to log in. That was my fault last week for the Wednesday lecture. I did forget to post one in there. So I'm going back and giving people excused absences if you were supposed to log in online. All right, I will see you for the second lecture.